In South Africa, employment equity compliance is more than a legal obligation. It's a commitment to transformation and equal opportunity. With the recent amendments to the Employment Equity Act, compliance has become more structured and more critical than ever.
EECMS, or Employment Equity Compliance Management Services, are specialists in the employment equity compliancy field. Backed by several years of proven expertise and a team of senior employment equity specialists, EECMS delivers the expert guidance and support you need to achieve effortless EE compliance with confidence.
From setting numerical targets and drafting your EE plan to generating legally compliant reports and tracking progress throughout the years, EECMS handles it all seamlessly.
EECMS doesn't tell you what to do or how to do it, we do it for you.
So, who must comply with the Employment Equity Act? In South Africa, the EE Act, as amended, applies to all designated employers, including municipalities, organs of state. As defined, employers bound by collective agreement and employers that employ 50 or more employees.
Designated employers are, amongst others, legally required to consult with a representative trade union, where applicable, or a well-established employment equity committee.
Assign responsibility to one or more senior managers to oversee the EE compliancy process.
Consult on, develop and implement an economically active population analysis. This EAP analysis needs to align with sectoral numerical targets determined by the Minister and needs to inform your EE plan of transformation.
Consult on, develop and implement an employment equity plan.
And submit annual employment equity reports to the Department of Employment and Labour.
Non-compliance could result in fines and penalties starting at the greater of 1.5 million rand or 2% of turnover, or up to 2.7 million rand or 10% of turnover.
Non-designated employers can request and obtain a Section 16B compliance certificate based on the following requirements.
Employ less than 50 employees. Is not a municipality, organs of state as defined. Are not bound by collective agreement. Are not paying below minimum wages. And have not been found guilty of discrimination in the preceding 12 months.
Through EECMS and our specialists, each of these legal requirements are simplified, tracked, consulted on and managed through a state-of-the-art online portal and online meetings, making compliance structured, accurate, timely and stress-free.
Stay compliant, stay ahead. Let EECMS become your EE compliancy division today.
For more information, please visit www.eecms.co.za.
Colleagues, as mentioned, my name is Peter from EECMS. Thanks again for your valuable time this beautiful Tuesday morning. Colleagues, the purpose of this session is a disability awareness webinar session. The reason for this session, colleagues, we received numerous requests from our clients with regards to disability, definition of disability. We all know that the target for designated employers to employ designated employees within the next four and a half years, give or take, by the 31st of August 2030, is 3% of your workforce profile. In other words, should you employ 100 people, your target would be 3 out of the 100 needs to be disabled or people living with disabilities by end of August 2030. So we then thought it well, since we as EECMS are not specialists in the field, we thought it well to invite Ari to give all of us a presentation on disabilities, definition, how it will impact on your EE, etc., etc. So, colleagues, before I'm going to hand over to Ari, just a little bit about Ari. Ari is the former CEO of the Quad Para Association of South Africa and present board member. Ari is also a board member of Epilepsy South Africa, executive member of the South African Disability Alliance, as well as member of the Presidential Working Group on Disabilities. Okay, Ari will share with us today valuable information on disabilities and people living with disabilities, a little bit more on the employment equity, the 3% target, etc. And I'm going to hand over then to Ari on this beautiful day. Thank you very much. Ari, over to you.
Good morning, Peter. Let me start with a simple question. What if the talent you've been overlooking is exactly the talent your organization needs right now. In our country, shaped by the principles of the Employment Equity Act, we often speak about compliance, targets, numbers, reports. But today I want to shift the conversation, because employing persons with disabilities is not about ticking a box. It's about unlocking resilience, innovation, loyalty, and problem-solving ability that most organizations are actively searching for, yet rarely recognized in this space. The truth is that disability doesn't mean inability. And in a world where adaptability is the ultimate competitive advantage, those who have had to adapt their entire lives bring something extraordinary into the workplace. So today is not about obligation. It's about opportunity. It's about seeing value where others have failed to look and having the courage to act on it. The Employment Equity Act is important because it transforms the workplace into a level playing field. It moves beyond simple fairness by requiring employers to actively remove physical and systemic barriers, providing the reasonable accommodation necessary for people with disabilities to demonstrate their professional excellence and contribute to the nation's economy. So let's see how we do it and not why we have to do it. And I think that that's so important today is let's not go through how we achieve our targets, but rather why we want to achieve our targets. And for me, that's more significant than anything else. So let's forget my titles. I am a person with a disability. I broke my neck in a diving accident at Durban's Waterworld in 1985. So I'm now in my 42nd year as a wheelchair user. Before I got into the advocacy space and working in the NPO environment, I was a bit of a serial entrepreneur. It took me a few years to get through rehabilitation and to get myself into a mindset where I needed to earn and I needed to make a contribution. And in the last sector of my life, I needed to make a difference as a person with a disability. But I want to give a disclaimer. I came from white privilege. That's a statement, and I don't have to detail that. I think everybody's got their own definition of white privilege. I had parents that were professionals and that could afford to assist me in the beginning when I needed a step up after rehabilitation to get myself going. I had private school education, I had university education, and that is a disclaimer because it's not easy for somebody in the exact opposite position to knock on your door and present themselves for a job opportunity. Skills are not difficult to come by. There are logistics around getting them. But please understand that your presenter has made a disclaimer now, and it's important that I can answer questions from those that come from the most rural and poverty-stricken environments. I've been there, I've met people, I've had hundreds of conversations with those persons. I've numbered the slides so that if you've got a query on any of the slides, just jot it down, and after, when we get to the end, let's go back and take hands. I'm sure that Peter and your team can manage that. And let's ask the questions in the session. We will have time. I'm not going to bore you with 2 hours worth of me talking. And then the presentation, I'll PDF it and I'll send it through to EECMS, who will send it to all of you that were present. I think there might be another session next month, Peter. You can confirm on the similar subject if you want to join again. This is not a deep dive. So let me tell you where the deep dive starts. I'm going to share my email address after this presentation. And as I've done before, with Peter and his team and all of those that subscribe to EECMS is I'm quite happy just with no charge, with no fee, because if I get an email query from anyone, it means you're taking an interest and you're showing your commitment to understand more about and how and the value of employing people with disabilities into your workplace. So in previous times I've presented here, I have had a number of queries and that have gone on for a couple of weeks and a couple of months, even with some companies. So I'm happy to do the deep dive with you on a one-on-one and email. And the last slide, I'll share my email address. I don't know if I mentioned my name. I'm Ari Seirlis, and it's an absolute pleasure to be able to present to you today. Today, I want to deal with, now this is not a deep dive, but I'm going to cover all of this, not shallow either. Understanding the definition of disability, I think it's critical to everything we're going to speak about today. Quickly talk about the Employment Equity Act. I know you can probably quote this act to yourselves or your colleagues easy peasy, but I'll just extract some important things about the act. It's intimidating, but I think you should embrace it, as I said in my opening statement. The white paper on the rights of persons with disabilities, I really believe you need to download this document in PDF format and have it handy, because that's the document that we, people with disabilities, get to understand not so much our rights, but the opportunities that the white paper give, because the white paper influences most policy and regulation and legislation that happens now. It's the document that we want to see as the basis of what's to come, which is a standalone Disability Act, which will give us much more power than PUPUDA, the Equality Act. Obviously, we'll touch on reasonable accommodation. I'm sure everybody there has got the idea of what that means. Types of disabilities, and I'll deal with, that's the big question, is this thing a disability? Is that circumstance a disability? There's a lot of confusion. It's actually not an exact science, and we can talk about that. Disclosure, I think that's the big elephant in the room at most of when I do these talks, is people missing out on staff that have disabilities who haven't disclosed and they're in your workplace. And it would be nice to acknowledge them, providing there's good disclosure protocols, and then before you know what, your numbers are a bit higher than you actually thought. So let's talk about some ideas about how to not extract disclosure, but how to encourage disclosure. Obviously, as a person with a disability, I want to tell you a bit about the value proposition of persons with disabilities. As I said earlier, let's talk today about how we do it, not why we have to do it. It's just the Employment Equity Act has been imposed upon you. So now let's just find a good way of making it work for ourselves. No talk about bringing people in the workplace is going to go without talking about myths, manners, do's and don'ts. In fact, the Quad Para Association of South Africa has printed a booklet called Sawubona Disability. It's in 5 languages. It's English, Afrikaans, Zulu, Xhosa, can't think of the 5th one now, and a PDF format. So if you want, I'm quite happy to send it to you. It's in a cartoon format, and it tells you all the things not to say and the things how to say it. So it's very valuable. It's the first discrimination that takes place in the workplace, often is terminology issues. I'll talk a bit about sensitization, which I think, is pointless bringing a person in the workplace if the workplace hasn't been sensitized, over and above reasonable accommodation. I'll break down what universal access means, and then I'll talk quickly about barriers of entry. What are the barriers of entry that persons with disabilities prohibits them from taking that, call it a leap of faith, to get into the workplace? It's really important to understand the definition of disability. Out of the Code of Good Practice, persons with disabilities include those with long-term, okay, that's the big thing, long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments, which interaction with various barriers. We're going to talk about all these various barriers, which interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. It's in the code. all of us should have the code on hand when it comes to all the protocols and the elements we need to consider when we bring someone with a disability in the workplace. And then, of course, the Standard Employment Equity Act definition we all know. I just put it in red there: long-term or recurring, physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory. Long-term or recurring. And I get emails from lots of people saying, is this long-term? Is this recurring? What is considered a disability? What is not considered a disability? And as I said, it's not an exact science. I'll cite some examples just now. But if you're just looking for one sentence of what persons with disabilities embrace, it goes like this: that disability is an experience that arises out of the interaction between a person with a health condition. Okay, we are not sick, and we don't want to be healed, and we don't want to be fixed. It's really important. And the context within which we live or they live. I'll always rather use the term we. So that can be fixed. That can, the more inaccessible our environment is, and it's not only about ramps and toilets, it's many other things that create, that are barriers for us, where we live, where we work, the ward we live in, the town we live in, the province we live in, affects how productive we are as persons with disabilities, depending on what our disability is. If, let's just use the simple one, wheelchair user. If you live in an area that's inaccessible, there's no public transport, accessible public transport, there's no ramps and scoops, you can't get to the shops, you can't get to a place to worship, you can't get to a stadium to watch your favorite team, which is, I'm a Zulu soccer team, by the way. I'm a big Usutu supporter. Then we are truly disabled. We are truly disabled. However, if we live in more commonly urban areas are accessible, I suffer my mobility impairment far less. And then it's really just a health condition. And I live in an accessible environment. I live as a wheelchair user in I'm shorter, and I'm used to sitting. I'm good at sitting. So I become good at things. I can push my wheelchair fast. So I'm faster than you can walk. All of a sudden, I have a competitive advantage in an accessible urban environment. Please keep that in mind. Quite often, and it's not easy to tell somebody, they say, I'm a wheelchair user. I'm living in, let's just take Umlazi. I can't get a job. And what do? How am I going to job? And the advice I give them is, well, it's not advice I want to give you, but it's advice I have to give you. You need to move to town. You need to leave home. That's your place that you love and your family, and you've got everyone around your dining room table. I'm going to ask you to alienate yourself from that. You've got to leave. You've got to rent a flat in town. Okay, there are all sorts of other logistics, but if you want to earn and if you want to change your life, and you do change your life by earning, move close to work. It's quite often people, when they move their kids from one school to other, you might find them migrating to that area, so they don't spend a lot of time picking and dropping their kids. So they're quite influenced where they choose their location to buy or rent where their kids are at school. The same with getting a job. And so it reduces the impact of your disability somewhat if you don't have to worry about accessible transport, etc. Okay, so the reason why we're here, because of this Employment Equity Act and the amendment of number 4 of 2022, we don't, as persons with disabilities, see a huge impact on our lives because there was an amendment, and the amendment was so light duty. But, you know, it's the document we're talking about. And the purpose of the Act was the elimination of unfair discrimination and to achieve equity in the workplace by promoting equal opportunity and fair treatment through the elimination of unfair discrimination on grounds of race, gender, disability, and sexual orientation. Just note, sexual orientation has been added into this. And affirmative action measures to implement affirmative action measures to redress disadvantages experienced by the designated group. It's Black people, women, and persons with disabilities, ensuring their equitable representation across all occupational levels. I know you all know this, but we're just skimming over that to know this is why we gather today to have this discussion. Okay, so these two documents you really have to have in your ammo belt, on your desk if you're in the space of dealing with your persons with disabilities in the workplace, the Code of Good Practice and the Technical Assistance Guideline. And let me tell you in simple terms the difference between the two. And I think it's quite important to understand that. The Code of Good Practice serves as the authoritative policy framework for the Employment Equity Act. While the Act provides the legal skeleton, the Code provides the flesh, offering the official interpretation of how the law should be applied in the workplace. So the Code will give you the flesh. Its primary purposes include establishing legal consistency. It ensures that employers and the courts have uniform standard of interpreting what constitutes fair treatment and unfair discrimination regarding disability. And as I said, this fair and unfair, they can deviate terribly to your disadvantage or to your advantage. And then the Code also defines employers' obligations. It explicitly outlines the duty of the employer to provide reasonable accommodation, ensuring that no person is denied a job or promotions simply because their disability requires modifications to the workplace or work process. Guiding the employment lifestyle, it provides specific do's and don'ts for every stage of employment, including recruitment, ensuring that adverts and interviews are accessible. And we can talk about that, or maybe there's a question, maybe I'll prompt a question to say, how and where do we advertise to find persons with disabilities? Where do we recruit from? Where's the pool? Where's the pool of CVs? Where's this pool of skills amongst persons with disabilities that we can go fishing? Where's that pond? I haven't put it in this presentation yet. Maybe that's another discussion we can have. But if you want to put it up or put your hand up when we go to questions, I can help you, guide you to where you go fishing. Depends what bait you're putting at the end of your line. If you're putting good bait, that's if you've heard everything I've said today, and it makes you look like the employer of choice, you're going to do fine. You're going to get the best skills out of someone with a disability. Instead of fishing in, let's say, the pond of people that have been through learnerships, that haven't learned a lot and are fussy about who they work for because they've been spoilt in the learnership environment. And I'll talk about that as well today. Selection, focusing on the essential functions of a job rather than arbitrary physical requirements. And retention, how to manage employees who have become disabled during their tenure. And then the Code of Good Practice also sets strict standards for medical testing and confidentiality of health information, ensuring that disclosure is handled ethically. Disclosure, that's a difficult one. But there are some tips and treats, and we'll talk about it today. And then the Technical Assistance Guidelines, okay, let's just call it the TAG, on the employment of persons with disabilities, is a practical how-to manual designed to help employers, employees, and trade unions implement the legal requirement of the Employment Equity Act. So it belongs to employers, employees, and trade unions if they're getting involved in this discussion. And its primary purposes are standardizing the definition. It provides clarity on how to identify people with disabilities using the three-part legal test that we spoke about in the definition: impairment, duration, and limitation. Oh, that's an interesting impairment, duration, and limitation, especially when you're looking to try and extract people in your existing work staff complement who haven't disclosed for their own reasons. Operationalizing reasonable accommodation, it gives specific guidance on how employers should modify the work environment, such as adjusting physical spaces, changing working hours, or providing assistive devices to allow people with disabilities to perform jobs effectively. And then it also It does also talk about unjustifiable hardship. And I'll talk about that as well. Preventing unfair discrimination, the tag outlines best practices for the entire employment lifestyle, from accessible recruitment and interviewing techniques to fair performance management and promotion. The tag also gives guidance on encouraging disclosure. It establishes protocols on how employees can safely disclose their disability and how employers must handle that sensitive medical information with confidentiality. And then my last guidance on what the tag does, it promotes inclusion. Beyond mere legal compliance, the tag serves as a tool to help transform the workplace culture and remove the barriers, that's both physical and attitudinal, that prevent full participation. So in short, while the Act tells you what you must do, the tag explains how to do it in a way that's legally sound and practically effective. And the Code of Good Practice, I've explained, gives you your policy and principles. So I want to go back a step and I spoke earlier on in the introduction when I showed you the agenda for today, that the document, there's no actual legislation. This is the white paper on the rights of persons with disabilities, which came out of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And this white paper was published in December 2015. And whereas in the UN Convention there are 50 articles, the white paper, which domesticated the UN Convention. So don't worry about the UN Convention now. If you're looking to mitigate any issues you think you might have, the white paper on the rights of persons with disabilities is the document that we, persons with disabilities, empower ourselves with understanding government's intention to ensure that legislation follows the 9 pillars and that it integrates the white paper into legislation, into regulations, and into policies. And I think you should be aware of this. So I'm going to deal with Pillar 1, just a quick summary. And this Pillar 1 and Pillar 5, those are the two I'm going to talk about, are focused on employment and empowerment opportunities for persons with disabilities. And so Pillar 1 is removing barriers to access and participation. And when we talk about removing barriers to access and participation, we're mainly talking about the built-in environment, enforcing standards for all public buildings to ensure physical access through ramps, elevators, and white corridors as a fundamental right. Now, just saying that, I know we're all thinking about how to get wheelchair users or people with mobility impairments in and out of buildings. Well, I'll talk about out just now, but getting us into the workplace. It also gives detail on, and universal design and universal access gives detail that it's not just about wheelchair users. There are a lot of other elements to consider. If you've got ramps and toilets, you don't say we're accessible. I'll talk about that under universal design. It's about space, it's about circulation, it's about lighting, it's about communication. And also, please remember that you can brag about being accessible and for most disabilities. But when it comes to evacuation procedures, please make sure we're not left in buildings when there's a fire or an emergency. You really need to have foolproof evacuation protocols. Those were often forgotten about when people looked at catering for employers looked at catering for persons with disabilities. And that's why we moved to the concept of universal access, and that's moving beyond basic disability access to universal design, ensuring that environments are usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without adaptation. So when it comes to digital rights, ensuring that all government websites, and yours too, and digital service are compliant with accessibility standards. And if you want to know what that is, there's the Web Content Advisory Guidelines, which is a set of international voluntary technical standards designed to make digital content accessible to people with disabilities. So you can Google that and get all the details of how to transform your website or whatever information you're putting online to being accessible to all persons with disabilities. And then having assistive technology, promoting affordable access to screen readers, voice recognition, and other critical information and communications technology. Sorry about the acronym there. That's information and communications technology. And it's so amazing how people with disabilities have transformed to having these physical elements of trying to communicate to now using digital support services across all disabilities. So, you know, the world is changing in favor of our ability to communicate on an equal level with anybody. And then public signage, mandatory inclusion of braille, high contrast text and tactile markings in public transit and facilities. Just to mention, it's a fact now that less than 5% of blind persons are using braille at the moment. I'm not saying that it should be excluded, but I think there'll come a time when nobody's using braille. We know AI and all sorts of technological and advancements will make sure that blind people have a completely different way and a more functional way of gathering information. Eliminating systematic barriers. The white paper mandates that 100% of all new infrastructure and public transport systems must be fully accessible from the design phase. And there is a regulation, which is the SANS Part S10400, I'll show you in the slide just now, that give you guidelines as to the minimum design criteria that's required now. And that's been updated in the end of 2025 to be a document that we feel is best practice in terms of designing for access in the workplace. Then all government departments must conduct accessibility audits, implement phased retrofitting plans to ensure complete barrier removal by 2030. Peter mentioned 2030. I think he mentioned 3%. I know government is aiming at 7%. Hard to get there, but yeah, let's hope. And when we say government or university, because that's the breeding ground where you get your skills from, I'm also talking to you, employers. And then pillar 5, as I said, the 2 pillars that you want to look at in the white paper are pillar 1 and pillar 5. There's a dozen pages for each of these pillars, and there's great stuff in there, and it's not difficult to understand. And I'm not going to put all the pages up here. This is just a quick summary. And pillar 5 speaks to reducing economic vulnerability. The objective is to systematically reduce the economic vulnerability of persons with disabilities and their families by removing barriers to participate in mainstream economy. Okay, so please also know that if you're in a position to disperse enterprise development funding through your BBBE scorecard, there are many people with disabilities, especially Black people, who have started small businesses in their communities and giving them an opportunity to either start, but more importantly, to scale their businesses in the enterprise development field. Ask me, I'll point out a number of people that would be very grateful for your ED spend if you're looking at satisfying your BBBE scorecard. Over and above employing people in your workplace, there are many entrepreneurs out there who felt the need rather to, or made the choice rather to be entrepreneurs rather than focusing on getting employment for various reasons. And then reducing economic vulnerability is also about releasing human capital, focusing on empowerment rather than charity. The mandate seeks to unlock the productive potential of all citizens, ensuring that disability is no longer a proxy for poverty, as it has been and as it probably still is now. So that means decent work, ensuring equal access to employment opportunities in both the formal and informal sectors. Again, reasonable accommodation, it's mandatory modifications to the work environment to enable full productivity, and then barrier-free recruitment, eliminate systemic bias in hiring, orientation, and professional growth. That's a difficult one. I've got some ideas. If you ask the question, well, as I said again, how do we advertise? How do we get the word out that there's jobs available? And then how do we find our people with disabilities? And releasing human capital, focusing on empowerment rather than charity. The mandate seeks to unlock the productive potential of all citizens, ensuring disability is no longer a proxy for poverty, as I mentioned earlier. It sets a definitive the white paper sets a definitive target for the representation of persons with disabilities across all sectors of the South African economy. And we must transition from the current 2%, which very few people reach anyway, the 2% minimum, towards the 3% in the immediate term, and annual increases designed to reach 7% threshold by 2030. That's not easy, but let's see if we can, between employers and persons with disabilities who've got skills, let's see what we can do if we can get there. Okay, so I've got no doubt that all of you debate reasonable accommodation. How do we get there? What can we do? What can't we do? What are we not prepared to do? So when it comes to physical workplace adjustments, ensure that entrances, exits, restrooms, and common areas are wheelchair accessible. Install ramps, wider doorways, and handrails. The document that you want to look at is Part S10400 from SABS, the Bureau of Standards, and that gives you the compliance, the building regulations. You can also focus on ergonomic furniture, provide accessible and adjustable desks, chairs, and workstations to accommodate different physical needs. There are assistive devices people will require, and that would be screen readers, magnifiers, voice-activated software. The problem with voice-activated software, it's quite a big investment. I think the investment belongs to you, the employer. However, the productivity is quite incredible. Just to use a personal experience on this, I have very little use of my hands and fingers, but with the use of 2 typing sticks, I can type about 30 words a minute. I've got used to that. The problem with little typing sticks with a little thimble at the end is it has no feeling. So you've got to look at your keyboard all the time. Whereas if you can type with fingers that have got feeling, you're looking at your screen all the time, and that's a huge advantage. So I transitioned to voice-activated software. I now can dictate a letter, a document. I can write a speech using my headset in a quiet environment with, I use Dragon Dictate Naturally Speaking, and I can type about 95 words a minute. And I doubt that many of you present today can do 95 words a minute. I know some of you now go to ChatGPT or Gemini and say, write my speech for me. This is what I want to say. Now, I guess that's half the speed. But if you want to stay authentic, voice-activated software works for me. However, in an open plan workplace, it's not great. There are a lot of disturbances, and it's a one software for one person. It recognizes one person's voice. However, if you're employing people working from home, even if someone has a speech defect, the voice-activated software program will learn that defect very quickly and will give you the output that you're looking for. There's speech-to-text software for employees with visual impairments and other things, as I spoke earlier on, escape routes, and to make that escape routes accessible, and you know where they are, and their protocols that get people to escape routes. When I talk about precinct considerations, please know, if you're going to do an access audit to say, okay, how accessible is our building? I'm also asking you to say, where is your building? Are you close to node of transport, how easy it is for someone to get when they leave the precinct of how easy it is for them to get to the bus rank, the BRT station, a taxi rank, or however they, Uber pickup point. It's really important, if you're serious about making an environment in your building totally considerate and universally accessible, go and check out places of entertainment for lunchtime, places of worship, or schools close by, and check out and see how accessible your ward is, where you are, so that your employees can also join their mates playing pool somewhere around the corner off the campus or off the precinct. Those are important things. Don't leave us in the canteen only. Go and see what the village looks like in terms of access. And then you've really cast your net far when it comes to doing a universal access audit on your property. If you've got, if everybody's working in, in your location. And then with technology and equipment in terms of regional accommodation, there's adaptive technology, implement specialized software and hardware such as voice recognition programs, alternative input devices, and hearing aids. I'll get to hearing aids. I don't believe that hearing aids are the responsibility of an employer. That's unjustifiable hardship. If an employee who doesn't hear well should be asking you to supply hearing aids, it's unjustifiable hardship, clearly. And then with communication tools, provide communication aids such as TTYs, but those are becoming extinct now for employees with hearing impairments, and large print materials for those with visual impairments. And subtitling. Subtitling is the new way that deaf people are surviving and doing well. Subtitling is tremendously important, even when it comes to, let's say, just watching sport. And you'll see subtitling, you probably will have seen it all the time now as being prominent on our, let's say, TV screens, but it's got to get onto our computer screens as well. Work schedule flexibility, embrace flexible working hours, allow flexible start and end times or part-time schedules to accommodate medical appointments or energy levels. Remote work, I think that's the way that lots of people are going, or certainly for a portion of their staff. Offer the option to work from home, especially for employees with mobility issues or chronic illnesses. We perform well at home. We do well. As I said, wheelchair users, we're good at sitting. We have all of our reasonable accommodations at home. We're less demanding on reasonable accommodation if we're working from home than in your workplace. We work well at home. We've got the support, whether it's caregivers or other support. We're close to our own toileting facilities, let's say. We don't need accessible transport anywhere. So I see the opportunity for, and I'm obviously disability specific, and I also want to talk about employing disability specific. For wheelchair users, we must sell ourselves, and you must look at how we perform. We'll probably perform better working from home than any other disability. I'm bragging a bit. But then again, don't confine us there. We also, certainly, depending on the task and the opportunity, it doesn't mean we don't want to be in the workplace. Also consider quiet environments. Another element of reasonable accommodation that's not often spoken about is maybe one task at a time, tasks in writing, extended leave for recovery, and you assess functions, not disability. It's really important. Don't assess us or depending on what disability we have. It's about how functional we are. Just unjustifiable hardship. Please know that I don't believe it's your responsibility to provide transport for your employee with a disability from home to work, door to door, unless it's done for all staff. If there's a staff bus, that bus has got to be accessible. However, if somebody can't use a transport infrastructure, then what you do there is you put a notice up on the notice board, or you circulate an email saying, is anyone coming from that area to our office? It's not it's not an employer's responsibility to provide accessible transport unless you're providing transport anyhow and anyway. You don't have to provide the caregiver. You don't have to provide the hearing aid. You don't have to provide the wheelchair. Those belong to us. Those are our personal items. So don't be conned, don't be fooled, don't think it's an obligation of yours. There are some finite things in unjustifiable hardship that you have the right to say, we've given you RA, reasonable accommodation, but no more. I don't know that you'll be in that situation often, but who knows? Here's some quick tips for reasonable accommodation. Adjust job responsibilities to match the abilities of the employee. This could involve relocating non-essential tasks or sharing duties among team members. Assistive support, provide personal assistance or job coaches to help employees with specific tasks or to navigate the workplace. It might be, I've got a whole lot of filing to do. Well, then let's give the filing responsibility to someone else that can reach or bend down, that can see, or it goes to another department or another area. So those are small things that you can adjust to make sure that someone is effective as possible without putting them in a position or lining them up for failure. With training and awareness, disability awareness training, educate all employees about disability inclusion, sensitivity, and the importance of a supportive work environment. I do run a sensitization workshop. It can be 3 days, or it can be 3 hours or 30 minutes. It all depends on how seriously you want to take disability sensitization. I can assure you there's a lot to cover in that, but it's not easy peasy, especially if you want to avoid any litigation of discrimination in the workplace by persons with disabilities. And there's no school that we go to learn how to catch an employer out. Please be aware of that. Policy and procedural adjustments. You must have inclusive policies, implement and enforce non-discrimination policies, and ensure that hiring, promotion, and compensation practices are equitable. Disclosure, establish a clear process for requesting accommodations, ensure confidentiality and prompt responses. Health and wellness support. You can offer counseling supports, counseling services, offer access to mental health support, and counseling for employees with psychological disabilities. And you could have a wellness program, develop wellness programs that are inclusive and accessible to employees with various disabilities. Now, if you look at all of these, job redesign, training and awareness, policy and procedural adjustments, health and wellness support, I can assure you that everyone in a workplace without a disability can enjoy the benefits of all of these 4 elements. And it's a guarantee that they will be in a better workplace. Not only are you putting these in to accommodate persons with disabilities, but your whole workplace will be a much better value proposition for all employees. And I'm sure that the productivity will be enhanced. Okay, so what is a disability? What are the disabilities that are out there? Paraplegic, quadriplegic, hemiplegic, amputee, stroke, muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, and chronic illness that causes arthritis and chronic fatigue in the physical bracket. Under sensory, you get blind, deaf blind, low vision, in hearing, partial hearing, deafness, lots of hearing, hard of hearing. So deafness is very different to loss of hearing and hard of hearing. They have 2 completely different ways of communicating, different language, and that's a lesson on its own. But if you ask a question, I can explain that. In intellectual, you get developmental, which is Down syndrome, autism, fetal alcohol, under learning, dyslexia, and ADHD. In the mental health space, depression, bipolar, TBI, that's traumatic brain injury, anxiety, panic, schizophrenia. You can also add there clinical depression. and that's providing that it's been diagnosed. Neurological, epilepsy and Parkinson's, and developmental, cognitive and functioning, speech and language. I guess you could also add in there persons with HIV and AIDS, providing that they meet the substantially limiting test. That's an interesting one. How you do those tests. Yeah, there are a number of tests that are available. We can talk about that in questions as well. So what generally does not qualify? And the Act excludes conditions that are easily corrected or do not meet the substantially limiting threshold. Correctable vision. If your vision is normal once you put on glasses or contact lenses, you don't qualify. Short-term injuries, a broken leg that heals in 3 months, it's not long-term. Behavioral disorders, compulsive gambling, kleptomania are excluded. And then substance use, disorders caused by current illegal drug or alcohol use do not qualify. Yeah, maybe unless a person is in a recognized rehabilitation program. So be careful what you look for in a disability. Let's stick in our lane with these 6 recognized disabilities, and then you can debate the pros and cons of how somebody presents themselves with a disability. You and I can have that debate, but careful who you force or encourage to disclose. Just another, interesting enough, is physical attributes in a standard variations in height, weight, or strength, as well as tattoos or piercings. Those are not disabilities. So, as I said, careful. Okay, so disclosing a disability in the workplace is a personal decision. But from a strategic and professional standpoint, it often serves as the key that unlocks specific legal protections and practical support. So this statement, I'm talking to people with disabilities. It can allow you legal protections and practical support. So the benefit, whether it's specialized software, ergonomic furniture, flexible working hours, or modified office layouts, disclosure allows you to perform your job at your peak potential without unnecessary physical or mental strain. So I'm saying to persons in the workplace who are mulling about disclose or not, there are a number of benefits. Once a disability is disclosed, you're officially protected under the Employment Equity Act. If you face unfair treatment or passed on for promotion due to your status, you have a clear legal standing. Without disclosure, it's much harder to prove that an employer's actions were discriminatory. Now, I don't want you to encourage disclosure in your existing staff complement to cause a divide between you and the person that's decided, I'm going to disclose for the wrong reasons. But there's some great reasons why it's important to disclose, and you could have these discussions with your workplace. Companies are often looking to promote and retain talent with designated groups to meet their equity plans. Disclosing ensures that you're accurately represented in the company's workplace profile, which can lead to inclusion in leadership, development programs, or specialized mentorship. You, as a person with a disability, you control the what and the how. You don't have to disclose your entire medical history. You only need to share the information that explains your functional limitations and the accommodations that are required. So disclosure is not a medical examination. You really want to talk about your functional limitations and the accommodations that are needed. So you don't need a doctor in this process. You need a discussion. And then, just interesting regarding disclosure, a person can disclose during the interview, after the job offer, or years into their employment. There is no wrong time, though I believe that doing so when you first require an accommodation is usually most effective. So there are benefits to disclosure. I think there's a value proposition for disclosure. And you as an employer, please encourage open communication. Make sure it's confidential. foster an inclusive culture, educate and raise awareness, have clear policies and protocols. And then, as I mentioned earlier, disclosure might allow for work from home possibilities. I want to talk about disability-specific recruitment. In the disability sector, I'm a quadriplegic wheelchair user. My competitors are blind people, deaf people, people with other disabilities. We compete with each other for the same job. We're not happy that some fast-moving consumer good companies, let's say like Woolworths or Checkers, just to name two, have identified that using deaf people on the checkouts is very, very effective. No one gets into a long conversation with them now with their basket of groceries that's going through the till, because someone might have a tag that's saying, "Hi, my name's Candy, I'm deaf." Well, there's going to be no conversation going on there. It's effective. You move through that till quickly. So, in fact, they've worked out it costs. There's a 50% improvement in the line speed if the people on the till are deaf people. They're competitors with us for getting this work. So there's a huge value proposition for the retailers to use deaf people, and lots of deaf people are getting into the workplace. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be having conversations with deaf people, but that's in a different environment. But in the retail space, it's very productive. So I will tell you, you can be. There's no law against disability specific. You can work out what are the pros and cons, what are the advantages and disadvantages of each disability. Please don't tell me that, but you can work that out. There's no law that says you can't have that discussion. And then employ accordingly, depending on what type of business you are. So if you find the need, or if you want to test it, go for it. You're not going to be frowned upon. And there will be certain types of disability that might not have had a chance in the workplace that if you see their specific value proposition, you'll employ. I've used this slide before, and I believe in everything the slide says here. So let me first say, without pointing to these 6 color blocks here, I think there's a reliability advantage of employing persons with disabilities. And research has cited that indicates that employees with disabilities often take fewer sick days than their peers. A study has found that employees with disabilities accrued less than half the amount of personal sick leave compared to the average employee. If anyone wants a case study, I'll show it to them. There's a ripple effect when teams see high levels of dedication and lower absenteeism from colleagues who face additional daily challenges. There's a cultural impact. This report cites and notes that inclusion leads to a better work environment for everyone. All that you've given in terms of reasonable accommodation benefits everybody. It's not only the person with the disability. An inclusive culture reduces the stigma of struggle, meaning all employees feel more supported, which is a known factor in reducing stress-related absenteeism and mental health days across the board. There's been a systematic review about loyalty and retention, and I can even quote it's Lindsay et al. That I've read, and this comprehensive systematic review of the benefits of hiring with people with disabilities highlighted that these employees are often more loyal and have lower turnover rates. It creates a psychosocial safety climate that benefits employees with and without disabilities. So staff with disability demonstrate high levels of loyalty. The level of employee turnover for persons with disability is low, and the retention rates are high. Fact, organizations that employ persons with disabilities are often regarded by their employees to be good employers. You want to be the employer of choice if you're looking for people with the right skills. Employing people with disabilities makes a positive impact on your reputation and brand. I see that. On average, staff with disability have productivity rates comparable to other employees. Obviously, of course, if you're giving them the reasonable accommodation, the sensitization, etc. in the workplace. Employing people with disabilities is shown to build staff morale and teamwork, and staff with disability have a low incidence of workplace injury. Yes, However, depends on where you place them. I want to talk about learnerships. I've got no doubt that all of you want to try and build in your staff complement and use the learnership opportunity of getting persons with disabilities in the workplace. There's learnership for a year, and then there's uptake. I honestly encourage you, if you are doing this, to stop this learnership and then bye-bye. Next year, another learnership and bye-bye. Because it doesn't do anything for persons with disabilities. And there are people with disabilities who have become serial learners. They've realized they're getting 2,400 Rand from the disability grant, and then maybe 3,000 Rand a stipend for their learnership. Some are on 2 or 3 learnerships. They don't get checked out by the different seaters. They're having a field day. They're not serious about getting work. Please be careful. Choose your learners carefully. Choose people that you would want to retain in the workplace. Otherwise, there's no point in this learnership program. And we go back to what I believe worked was apprentices in certain professions, having an apprentice rather than a learner. So there are benefits in having learners. So take that advantage, but choose people that you know you want to retain after the 12 months. You'll be a much stronger business if you do that. Otherwise, the system is just being abused, and people are using the benefits. They're using this triple BEE benefit to no benefit of persons with disabilities. It's just a call out. Quickly about the myths, manners, do's and don'ts. There's a common myth that people with disabilities are inherently inspirational. I don't have to be inspirational. I don't want to be inspirational if I don't want to. I just want to do the job that I was employed to do. And the reality is, a person with a disability is not a heroic act. We're not heroes that we've come into the workplace. It's simply a life experience. People with disabilities want to be seen as individuals, not symbols of courage. And the etiquette around that is treat colleagues with disabilities as you would any other peer. Avoid patronizing praise for performing everyday tasks. Well done, you managed to finish that report or whatever, just because I've got a disability. That clearly is patronizing. We don't want to be your hero. We want to be your colleague. Another common myth that if you can't see it, it isn't a disability. And the reality is that the majority of disabilities are hidden or non-visible, including neurodiversity, chronic pain, and mental health conditions. Never question the validity of someone's disability. Respect disclosure boundaries and accommodate needs without requiring proof. That's very simple. And if you break that one, you can be looking for some legal issues. Okay, the do's and don'ts. Ask before helping someone. Wait for your offer to be accepted and listen to specific instructions. Just a personal story. I've quite often wheeling in a workplace or in a shopping center, and all of a sudden someone behind me and pushing me as fast as they walk. And I'm saying, whoa, hold on. I said, what? Oh, no, I thought you needed a push. I said, no, I don't. Please just ask me. And then I'll tell you exactly, yes, I'd like a push, or no, I don't. Or maybe it's something that dropped in the ground that I needed help with, not the speed that you want me to be going. So speak directly, maintain eye contact, and address the person, not the interpreter or companion or caregiver. Identify yourself when meeting people with some of the visual impairment. Introduce yourself and others present. Allow time for communication or movement without rushing the individual, especially people that even have got a bad stutter. Don't finish the sentence, don't finish the word. That's the do's. And the don'ts. Don't lean on or move or touch wheelchair or cane. They're part of my personal body space. Don't just jump in to fix a situation unless the person explicitly requires assistance. And avoid baby talk or overly simplified speech unless asked to adjust your pace. Don't speak loudly to someone that you think has got a hearing impairment. And the stare or asking prying questions. Focus on a person's contributions and personally, not their medical history. From experience, kids do stare. Kids do ask amazing, sometimes unusual questions. That's okay for me. But I think if you bring that into the workplace, then, yeah, we're going to box a little bit if you keep asking me questions. But I must say, don't tell your kids, don't ask questions. Let's see what your kids come up with. You'll learn a lot, and you'll allow me to express myself. So it's different horses for courses when it comes to these do's and don'ts. So when we're building an inclusive, I say academic, especially if people on programs and team building and learning programs, then inclusive through attitude, accessibility, and action. Sensitization is more than just knowing about disability. The process of developing empathy, reducing stigma, and identifying the unconscious bias that create academic barriers between people. And the social model shifts the focus from the medical fix to the environment. So we don't want to be fixed medically. We just want a fixed environment. And it teaches your community or the learning environment. Disability is the result of poorly designed structures, policies, and attitudes. So when it comes to pedagogy, that's quite interesting, because if you need to learn a new program or to learn a new concept or a policy, it's really important that all the materials are accessible. There's also social inclusion, fostering a company, a business, a campus culture where your employees or your students with disabilities are integrated into the social, athletic, and leadership roles. I know quite often companies, if there's a few people with disabilities, all of a sudden they're all on the Employment Equity Committee. Let them be on the team building committee. Let them be on the Christmas lunch organizing committee. Don't just throw us all into the Employment Equity Committee. And then you must ensure the physical and digital environments allow for independent navigation and full engagement. Okay, universal design. I just want to impress this upon you. We don't talk so much about a building must be accessible. It must be universally accessible through universal design. It's the design and composition of environment so it can be accessed, understood, and used to the greatest extent possible by all people, regardless of their age, size, ability, or disability. We want everybody to benefit from a universally designed environment. Traditional accessibility often involves reactive adaptations or specialized add-ons, whereas universal design is a strategy that integrates inclusion into the very first step of a creative process. So if you design universally, you're caring for all human beings, not just us with disabilities. We don't want to be the reason why. We want to be part of the reason why, that a campus or a company caters for tall people, short people, large people, skinny people, pregnant people, people pushing prams, people using wheelchairs. Your whole staff complement will benefit from not an accessible environment, a universally accessible environment. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but if you look up universal design and access, you will see that there are 7 principles. You can go and see pictures of what they all mean, but it's equitable use, flexibility in use, simple and intuitive, perceptible information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, size and space for approach and use. Those 7 principles, if applied in a workplace, in a town, in a city, in a province, will make that space accessible for all people, not only people with disabilities. Just talking about universal design, unisex toilets are a must. Unisex toilets are the way to go. Everybody can use them then. They can be used by all. Let's say you want to put a new pathway between one building and the other. Wait to see which route all the walking people will take. And then you'll see, oh, the grass has been brown in this area. This is where people are walking. And so put your path there. Don't let your architect tell you where your path must go. Transport, make sure all transport is universally accessible to all. And as I mentioned earlier, please look at the whole precinct, not only inside your office when you've got there. How did I get there? From my door to your door, how accessible is that journey? Is it seamless or not? Just to give you an example of Part S 10400 SANS, this document, you can download it. You actually have to purchase it from the South African Bureau of Standards. It will give you to the millimeter every single specification. If you're retrofitting a building or if you're now building a new premises, this is a document that your architect or your developer or your landlord, you can hand this over to them or ensure that they are referred to this document, which gives you all the specifications, the number of parking, the heights of this, the grab rail of that, where everything should be, and make sure that they comply with this. Otherwise, you're going to set yourself up for failure. And if your building or your premises where you are employing persons with disabilities doesn't conform with 10400, then you've got reason for your employee to raise a grievance. Okay, so I want to talk about barriers of entry into the workplace. The first one, I mean, it's quite obvious, your inaccessible environment. Make sure that you don't employ a person with a wheelchair if you don't have an accessible environment. On the right, you'll see the ramp. On the left, you'll see the stairs. So that's a barrier of entry. Wheelchair users are not going to apply for jobs, and they're not going to perform if they're working in an inaccessible environment where there's no mitigation to load shedding if there are lifts. There's not an evacuation plan where they feel secure if there's going to be an emergency. Accessible transport to get to and from work. If it means relocating, or if you're considering locating your premises somewhere else, maybe you should consider, are you on a Gautrain route? Are you on an IRT route in Cape Town? Are you in a BRT route in the other 10 cities that have implemented or trying to implement bus rapid transit? I think it's important if you want to employ the right people. So a barrier to entry for a wheelchair user or someone with a mobility impairment will be, if they don't have accessible transport, you're not going to get access to us. We just can't get to mainly places of skills, then a job interview. And you're missing out on that intellectual property. Many people with disabilities feel that the bureaucracy of getting their disability grant back if they're not successful in the workplace is too great that they won't take that leap of faith. So if you are employing people that are still on the disability grant and want to make that transition to mainstream employment, give them the confidence that you will help them if they don't make it, get their SASSA grant back. It's 2,400 Rand a month at the moment. It's peanuts for us. It's wealth to them. And quite often more than one person benefits from that. So it is a huge barrier to entry in the workplace for people that are on a disability grant. Please know that and give them confidence that you'll support them. If they lose their grant, by taking that opportunity, you can help them get it back again. It might be part of the exit strategy obligations you give to a person with a disability. And also know it's so difficult. Someone might have skills, but they might have low self-esteem, no workplace experience, and also little access to job adverts. As I said earlier, you must choose who you're looking for, where you're looking for them. And it's really important to know that we might not necessarily be in the space where we see adverts where you drop them. And so there are some tricks and treats to drop your adverts or your opportunities to find persons with disabilities. We did a learnership years ago with 75 learners with disabilities, mainly physical disabilities, with the services CETA. And all of them passed the competencies to get to come onto the learnership. But 75% after the first quarter were failing, were not passing their assignments. And it's because we didn't realize where they'd come from. They were so secluded, and now they really battled with their self-esteem. And so we brought in a life coaching program for a month, and it changed everybody then. And all of a sudden, people had a different way of looking at the opportunity that they were given. So life coaching was a lifesaver for us, and 75% of those learners then became competent and passed their learnership after a year. Yeah, that was an interesting diagnosis for us. I put this slide in because I talk about us persons with disabilities. We have fears and dilemmas. Am I going to disclose? And how much am I going to disclose? Am I ready to come into the workplace? Am I skilled enough to be in the workplace? Am I confident enough? Am I prepared? Am I resilient enough? Am I brave? Am I ambitious? Am I serious about this? And do I know my rights? I think that that's very, very important, that we as people with disabilities must know our rights. Now, you yourself can also ask someone, do you want anything you want to disclose? Are you ready for the workplace? Are you skilled enough? Are you confident? Are you prepared? Are you resilient? Are you brave? Are you ambitious? Are you serious about this? And do you know your rights? And allow them to know their rights as a person with a disability coming in the workplace. And then, of course, I think the most important thing is for someone with a disability to approach you as the employer, is what is my competitive advantage? I must prepare my competitive advantage. And one thing AI and ChatGPT, Perplexity, Manus, whatever you're using, Claude, is not going to tell me what my competitive advantage is. I will tell you what it is. I know what it is. I mull over it all the time. And I believe I must have a competitive advantage if I want to get your job. And then, yes, I'll go for it. But I must know one thing as a person with the disabilities, is that employers don't go hunting and hunting for people with disabilities. I have to go looking for a job. So there's this responsibility that I have as well to myself to go and find the job I'm looking for. I can't point a finger at employers saying, I can't find, how do I get a job in your company? I also must know that I have a responsibility of going to look for a job. And so let me end off by saying this, that true innovation doesn't come from a room full of people who see the world the same way. It comes from those who have had to navigate the world not built for them. When we prioritize disability inclusion, we aren't just filling a quota, we are unlocking a masterclass in problem-solving resilience and perspective that our business quite literally cannot afford to ignore. I don't believe you can afford to ignore the quality and the resilience that people with disabilities bring into the workplace. So let me end off again by saying this. I personally believe that I would rather work in a workplace with someone who is deaf than someone who doesn't listen. I would rather work in a workplace with someone who is blind than with someone who doesn't have vision. And I would rather work in a workplace with someone who cannot walk than with someone who doesn't walk their talk. There's my email address. If you want to jot it down, it will be in the slides that will be sent to you. As I said, you're welcome to email me any fear, query, question, not one to ask today. And we can have I want to work for you, but we can have, I'll make sure that I reply to all your emails.
In South Africa, employment equity compliance is more than a legal obligation. It's a commitment to transformation and equal opportunity. With the recent amendments to the Employment Equity Act, compliance has become more structured and more critical than ever.
EECMS, or Employment Equity Compliance Management Services, are specialists in the employment equity compliance field. Backed by several years of proven expertise and a team of senior employment equity specialists, EECMS delivers the expert guidance and support you need to achieve effortless EE compliance with confidence.
From setting numerical targets and drafting your EE plan to generating legally compliant reports and tracking progress throughout the years, EECMS handles it all seamlessly.
EECMS doesn't tell you what to do or how to do it, we do it for you.
So, who must comply with the Employment Equity Act? In South Africa, the EE Act, as amended, applies to all designated employers, including municipalities, organs of state, as defined, employers bound by collective agreement, and employers that employ 50 or more employees.
Designated employers are, amongst others, legally required to consult with a representative trade union, where applicable, or a well-established employment equity committee.
Assign responsibility to one or more senior managers to oversee the EE compliance process.
Consult on, develop and implement an economically active population analysis. This EAP analysis needs to align with sectoral numerical targets determined by the Minister and needs to inform your EE plan of transformation.
Consult on, develop and implement an employment equity plan.
And submit annual employment equity reports to the Department of Employment and Labour.
Non-compliance could result in fines and penalties starting at the greater of 1.5 million rand or 2% of turnover, or up to 2.7 million rand or 10% of turnover.
Non-designated employers can request and obtain a Section 16B compliance certificate based on the following requirements.
Employ less than 50 employees, is not a municipality, organs of state as defined, are not bound by collective agreement, are not paying below minimum wages, and have not been found guilty of discrimination in the preceding 12 months.
Through EECMS and our specialists, each of these legal requirements are simplified, tracked, consulted on, and managed through a state-of-the-art online portal and online meetings, making compliance structured, accurate, timely, and stress-free.
Stay compliant,
stay ahead.
Let EECMS become your EE compliancy division today.
For more information, please visit www.eecms.co.za.